All right, another edition of the Greatest Calls Bracket Interviews. Very fortunate to be joined today by the great Jim Nantz of CBS Sports. Jim, I would have loved to hear you calling Masters number 35 this year, but I hope you and your family are staying safe. How's everything going?
Everybody's doing well, thank you. Jack, I'm just happy to be with you. So thanks for what you're doing to help promote our industry. We'll get the Masters come November, and we'll have two Augusta trips in a 5-month span. So a lot to look forward to.
Well, as you know, you're featured a couple times in the bracket, one of them being your call of Tiger Woods winning the Masters last year, a very emotional event. Why don't we play that one real quick, and then we'll go back and break it all down again. Here's Tiger Woods winning the 2019 Masters.
This is the minute that millions around the world had waited for. Waited for years. Many doubted we'd ever see it. But here it is. The return to glory.
A very emotional moment, the first major win for Tiger in 11 years, his first Masters since '05. How did that moment come to fruition for you? How did the words come about?
Really didn't give it a lot of pre-thought on that as he was coming up the final hole, and I saw his family waiting for him behind the green. I knew that this moment was going to be high on emotion, and I just had a sense of glory in his life, not just his golf glory that was about to complete perhaps the greatest comeback that we've ever seen in any sport, but really the return of glory overall in his life. That's what I felt at the moment, and I kept thinking in my head as this was playing out, I got to get the word glory in there because I think it's richer and it has that meaning that transcends the moment in golf. And I think that call, I get a lot of folks that want me to sign things that say return to glory. And I'm just glad that it's had a chance to resonate with people. But what I was most proud of, really, Jack, was the fact that after I said the return to glory, Nick Faldo and I didn't say anything for nearly 3 minutes. And that was what the scene deserved. The visuals and the audio were speaking so loudly that if we tried to somehow insert ourselves on that moment, we wouldn't have been doing our job very well. So I was particularly proud of what we didn't say as opposed to what we did say.
I know that's just one of many Masters you've called over the years. Like I said, would have been your 35th this year. You've called some great wins. Where do you rank that one in the scheme of all the Masters wins you've called? And what are some other memorable moments for you over the years at Augusta?
Jack Nicklaus, 1986. I was 3.5 years removed from graduating college at the University of Houston, and somehow CBS and Frank Chirkinian entrusted me to be at the 16th tower. It was a big, weighty assignment for a young kid that was working with voices that he had idolized growing up. And Jack made a pivotal birdie on that 70th hole, the 16th hole on Sunday. And I managed to get the words out that the bear has come out of hibernation. I didn't know at the time where that came from. In fact, I was concerned that maybe I'd already seen it or heard it earlier in our broadcast, since we had announce towers from 10 on in. So I thought, well, maybe I just parroted something that's already been said. As it turns out, it hadn't been said already.
And there's no doubt about it. The bear has come out of hibernation.
And I get asked about that quite frequently, but that was a real thrill to be there and be able to mark that historic moment. And then to be able to have the moment of Tiger's complete, comeback and return all those years later. And in between that stretch, there's been so many rich, fantastic stories to tell. I think the call that's going to be the one that, if you decide to go back to Zoom with me in about 100 years' time, Jack, I'm available. I think the call, though, from the Masters that's going to last is going to be the Tiger 97. There it is, a win for the ages.
There it is, a win for the ages.
That just was such a gigantic moment in the history of the sport. And he shattered every record that really ever existed at Augusta. He was the youngest to ever win. He won by the largest margin. He had the 72-hole scoring record, and that, of course, was his first professional major championship. And he had a 9-shot lead going into Sunday. So you knew, when you showed up at the compound on Sunday morning, that it was going to be imperative that you were there to document one of the most historical moments in the history of the game. And I definitely, and you wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't have some thoughts already in your head about how you're going to frame it at the end. But that clip, when he puts out from 4 feet away and knocks it in to set the scoring record and complete that incredible victory, and I said, there it is, a win for the ages. I really believe that when somebody comes on the air 100, 200 years from now and they play one of those montages, that will be there, because the moment you try to have a narrative that fits the moment, and 200 years from now, somebody might say, oh, I know why it was a win for the ages, because this, and this all happened. So that's the one that, to me, has the most historical significance of any Masters, 3 or 4 second narrative that I've had.
Jim, I did want to ask you, too, you've got a call that's into the Elite Eight in the bracket, your call of Kris Jenkins winning the national title for Villanova at the buzzer in 2016, one of only 2 buzzer beaters to win national titles in NCAA history. Why don't we play that one real quick, and then we can discuss. Here it is, Kris Jenkins for Villanova in 2016.
Going to go length of the court with Archie Diacono. 3 seconds at midcourt. Jenkins gives it to Jenkins for the championship. Champions with Jenkins hitting the winner at the buzzer.
So he hits that shot, the streamers go off, the cannons are going wild. Take us through that moment.
Well, it was 4.6 seconds from the inbounds pass until the buzzer sounded, but it felt like it was about an hour. And there's a lot that goes on inside that tiny window. And what I'm most proud of with that call is the fact that we're lost in the moment, and I'm in concert with one of my teammates. You heard Grant Hill foreshadow it by saying, watch out for Jenkins. And I actually am speaking to Grant. He gets it to Jenkins. I'm not ignoring what he said. And again, all this is racing in front of you, but in a way it feels like it's in slow motion. So I'm most proud of the fact that Grant, who's just an awesome teammate, tipped that to the viewer. And then I was able to really have a conversation, so to speak, with Grant in that millisecond, and be able to answer that. I see Jenkins, you're right, and he gets the ball to Jenkins, and then the ball's released, and I said it's for the championship. There's another couple of things that are really brilliant about that. After the ball goes through the net and they win the title, Bob Fishman, our legendary director, immediately cut to a shot of Rolly Massimino celebrating. And anyone who's a college basketball fan understands the importance and weight of the Villanova 1985 championship led by Rolly Massimino. And here he was in retirement. And then sadly, as it turns out, within 2 years of his passing, there he was for his old school with his arms raised in an embrace with Mike Fratello. For Fish to see the ball go through and then call for that cut to that other camera and capture Rolly at that moment, that's some, those are instincts. That's some genius directing right there.
I did want to ask you real quickly, Jim, about Jack Buck, your opponent in the Elite Eight. I know you and Joe are close, of course, his son. Jack Buck's call, Kirby Puckett, is facing you in the Kris Jenkins call. Just your thoughts on Jack and the legendary voice.
Oh, listen, I'm almost I'm giddy with the fact that you just mentioned my name in the same sentence as Jack Buck. I have such a regard for him and for Joe, who's an awesome broadcaster. I hope he wins because I love the fact that you're remembering the real pillars of our industry who built this. I've cared so deeply about the voices of my youth, the Jack Bucks, and I know Vin Scully is heavily represented in this, and the Keith Jacksons, and Jim McKay and Jack Whitaker, Pat Summerall, a huge mentor to me, Chris Schenkel, Kurt Gowdy, Jim Simpson. I mean, the list goes on. Dick Enberg. The list goes on forever. And the fact that these guys of that generation are being remembered today, I think it's fantastic. I could write a book on having met all the Jack Bucks of the world and having had a relationship with guys like Jack and Jack Whitaker, who just passed away. And these calls are interesting. Calls have become such an important thing because I think of social media and everything. But when I was really raised, we weren't the call other than like Al's, which it's got to be still alive. The hockey thing.
It's a favorite for sure.
I don't put Al on that generation because Al's one of my dearest friends, and I consider it to be, even though he was a few years older, but I consider us to be of the same time. It's just a lot of what I was raised on was the actual management of a 2 or a 3 hour show. Like when you're doing your Nicholls States game, you don't want your work and preparation to be boiled down to how you made one little 5-second call. There's so many more nuances to it that sometimes I think people get misunderstood. It gets misunderstood what we're there to do. It's like you're just waiting and see if you can nail that big moment. But in the meantime, you got 3 hours of calling a play, calling a trip down the floor, and those little anecdotal, moments, and how you handle your analyst during all this. I mean, that's to me what makes a broadcaster more than the call. But I think it's cool what you're doing. And I know you know what I'm saying here because you do it, you apply it when you're doing your games.
100%.
So I would love to see Jack win this matchup. And I would love to see some Howard Cosell. I mean, I got rattling some names there, but they had such a huge influence on me and my desire to one day be a voice. And I just love the way they were able to document and tell a story. And all these years later, for them to be remembered, good for you, Jack. That's awesome.
The legendary Jim Nantz of CBS Sports. Jim, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. Best of luck against Jack Buck in the Elite Eight. I know I gave you a tough draw, but hope you and your family.
Okay. As I said, I don't deserve to be this far into the brackets, and the fact that Jack is there, I'd love to see him win it. And thank you so much for just having a chance for me to relive some very fun times that I was just very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time.